Hello and welcome into the Devil Source Postgame show. I'm Sammy Miller alongside Chris Cartman, following not only ASU's first Pac-12 game of the season, but also the beginning of Sean Aguano's coaching era. Now, ASU did end up losing to number 13 Utah, 34-13 tonight. It was a very lopsided game, Chris. What are your initial takeaways?
Yeah, you'd like to see Sean Aguano have a better performance if you're an ASU fan than they were able to summon tonight, but they were in a really significant challenge, right? They just losing to Eastern Michigan, having a lot of discipline issues, not doing well with the offense, going into a game against a defense like the one that they faced tonight. It was kind of going into a horrible sort of a situation for your first game if you're Sean Aguano, and really not surprised by the outcome. ASU struggled to run the ball. Defense really couldn't get off the field on third downs, was behind the chains on offense really throughout the night, and the result not really that surprising when you look at it.
And because this was Aguano's first game as the interim head coach, how do you think he tried to implement certain new things, and did they end up working out for them?
Yeah, so clearly they wanted to be a little bit quicker with their offensive tempo and pacing. Problem though is that they weren't able to get first downs in the first half. They only had one. And then that sort of contributed to their inability to get into any sort of an offensive rhythm. So the things that he really tried to accomplish, they weren't able to be put on display. We saw before the game even, they were locked arms and everybody was trying to get into this Ohana family vibe, get some good energy and mojo coming out, but then because of the way that they played on offense, that wasn't really able to happen. And so I don't think that we're able to really fully see what Aguano was trying to accomplish tonight.
And like you said, ASU's offense had a very slow start and never really heated up at any point in the game. So what do you think contributed to that?
Well, so ASU's been a pretty good run team in recent years, and even including this year. Xavier Valade over 100 yards pretty consistently. Tonight it just wasn't there. It felt like every time they ran the ball on first down, it was like a 2-yard gain, a 1-yard gain. Utah very stout at the point of attack, did a really good job. ASU hasn't been able to get any sort of a short to intermediate passing game with any consistency. And then Emory Jones was under a lot of duress because after those that inability on first and second down, it was third and long pretty much consistently. The first 5 were third and long with the exception of a 3rd and 4 where they actually had an offensive penalty when Gio Sanders had a catch down the field. So behind the chains, didn't handle the pressure well, didn't run the ball well. You put all that stuff together and it makes for a situation where you have to basically throw the ball a lot to be able to be successful. And Utah has such a good passing defense as well that didn't happen. And then Emory Jones wasn't as accurate with some of his throws tonight as I'm sure his coaches would have liked.
And because ASU's offense struggled, the defense was on the field for a lot of the time. So what do you think the strengths and weaknesses were for them?
Yeah, they did a decent job against the run. Tavion Thomas, Utah's top running back, I think maybe he was disciplined. He didn't play in the first half, so they had their backups on the field. ASU didn't get anywhere nearly as gash as they did against Eastern Michigan, and of course this is a much better Utah team than that, so that's a positive. They got Utah into some third and long situations, but then they gave up some long passing conversions, and that's a problem. ASU was thin in the secondary because Ro Torrance didn't play, Ed Woods didn't play, Keon Markham and Kewan Markham didn't play. That's 4 of their top 7 or 8 defensive backs that weren't on the field in this game. Ended up basically playing a bunch of backups and young guys that they hadn't played to this point. It's not the recipe for success against Utah, especially when you're on the field so much because your offense is only playing 55 or whatever snaps on the night. I think that the score could have even been more lopsided in some ways than it actually ended up being. It wasn't like Cam Rising had a bunch of big passes. They had the flea flicker early that got ASU, similar to what happened with Oklahoma State. ASU had multiple coverage breakdowns. I think it was Connor Soley and then maybe Tamarcus Davis. Tamarcus Davis didn't play well. He hasn't looked good to start the season for a 6-year senior. But beyond that, there weren't a lot of big breakdowns on vertical passing. Brant Keithy, Utah's tight end, got knocked out of the game with a leg injury of some kind. I think that took away one of Utah's biggest capabilities, coupled with Tavion Thomas not playing in the first half. Had those guys been really, there the whole game, I think that would have actually made it even more of a one-sided affair.
And even though the Sun Devils did lose this game, are there any positives that you think Sun Devil fans can take away from a game like this?
Well, Isaiah Johnson, he jumps right to mind, right? He hasn't even been in the two deep for ASU throughout his whole career, year and a half or whatever it is at this point, but he was the highest rated recruit in his class, really athletically gifted, tall, long, lanky. So he starts because of ASU having these other corners that are out, and he actually handled it quite well. I thought he was better than Tamarcus Davis tonight. That's a very positive sign because they've needed to kind of get a jump start from him that hasn't been there to this point in his career. So now I think he'll be able to battle Davis and Ro Torrance, who Sean Aguano said will probably be back. Corey Bethley, because of Keywan Markham's absence, ended up leading the team with 14 tackles. He was Hawaii's best player over a 3-year period. I'm sure this means he's going to be on the field a lot more and starting. And some of those were maybe some missed coverages where he had to make a tackle, so you don't want to have all those tackles if you're ASU. They moved BJ Green to end, so maybe that could help them with some of their run defense, getting another stouter body out there, because Trevez Moore and Joe Moore are not as good against the run as they are probably as pass rushers. So I saw maybe there were some positive signs. Elijah Badger, he lost the fumble and then he committed a penalty after that. So you can't have that if you're ASU, but he continued to show that he's capable of being ASU's go-to target in the passing game. So yeah, there were some signs. ASU had 2 good long returns, and neither one of them were DJ Taylor. Daniel Ngata had a nice return, so maybe that can get them kind of going on some of their special teams. But of course, overall, this was a bad performance, not particularly disciplined, and not nearly good enough.
Now, the Sun Devil schedule doesn't get any easier from here. They're heading on the road to Los Angeles to face a very tough competitor in USC. So what do you think they're going to need to do to try to get a win in LA?
They've got to do better on first and second downs on offense. Now, what they tried to do tonight was they tried to get Emory Jones involved in some more zone read actions, get him kind of on the edge where he can have some options to run the ball. Didn't really work out all that successfully. You know, a few plays here and there kind of worked, and they need to also do more with their short passing game, their quick game, some more RPO success, but Utah is so good that they weren't able to kind of really get that going, and they didn't get enough first downs in some of these possessions so where they can then get the ball rolling downhill. Sean Aguano wants to play a little bit faster. He said we have to evaluate some changes because we haven't been good enough, but he reiterated that he's confident. And Glenn Thomas, offensive coordinator, and look, the truth of the matter is, Sammy, they're not going to be able to change what their offense is in the middle of a season. You don't just get a whole new playbook and everybody then learns it and then you go do that stuff against the Trojans, right? Like, they're going to have to figure out where they can live within their playbook that they can have some success. But yeah, it's a brutally difficult thing that they've inherited.
It will be a tough one. Well, that's all the time we have tonight on this edition of the Sun Devil Source Postgame Show. But don't you worry, we have a lot more coverage, so make sure to follow along on sundevilsource.com.